Okay, so here we are. This effectively is the review for week 4. We're going to talk about competitive advantage. Really critical if you think about what strategy is all about and what the purpose of any form of competition is all about. And Sun Tzu talked about this, didn't he, in terms of live or die. So the purpose of your competitive advantage essentially is to give you the chances of survival and life as opposed to death. And think about that in terms of being a warrior on a battlefield. You can't just win one of the battles. It has to be a continuous series of wins in order that you can come off the battlefield at the end of the day and still be alive. And therefore, it isn't the case that you can be successful or sustainable just by having one win and then one loss, 2 wins and then 1 loss. Effectively, when you lose, and that's the game over. All right, so think about that concept of competitive advantage over the next few weeks and try to apply it, in fact, to all the different concepts and techniques that we'll be looking at. So, for example, this coming week, we're looking at the concept of evolution and revolution as industries grow. And clearly, competitive advantage and your basis for competitive advantage may well change during that time. So, competitive advantage is almost never one thing. It is a continuous strive of an output of strategy which develops and delivers something which is better than anything else perceived by the customer. Okay, so that's the key thing. Think about it in those ways. So one of the things we talked about last week is this idea that strategy can be at different levels. So strategy can be at a business level, which is about the industry structure and your immediate competitors. Strategy can be at a corporate level. So that's about which industry should you be in. So you don't have to be in one industry, and Qatar Petroleum, in fact, is a good example of a company that invests in many different industries, some of which are competing with each other. So, renewable energy is a different industry than the oil and gas industry, but clearly they're sort of complementary, because when one goes up, the other goes down, when one goes down, the other one goes up. So actually that's a good balance to have, isn't it, to make sure that you're always in the right industry at the right time. So hopefully you like my new haircut. Thank you for those of you that mentioned that I've lost weight and developing a wonderful tan. It's all true. But back to work. Okay, so strategy then can be at all different levels, but so can competitive advantage. So the competitive advantage of a business in a particular competition, in a particular industry, could be based on its unit cost. Lowest cost production is a typical example of competitive advantage. We can make things cheaper than anybody anywhere else because we either have the technology or the skills or the resources, or we just happen to be in the right place at the right time. So in that case, that's your competitive advantage for that business. Okay, and what competition is trying to do is take away your customers by using their own competitive advantage. And they may have a different competitive advantage. For example, they may have the highest quality or the most unique. So for that reason, it is a case of having a constant battle. This is a lifelong battle, in fact, of lots and lots of fights. And for each of those, you have to win every single fight. So that's the way to think about competitive advantage. At a corporate level, of course, it's even more complicated because you're trying to predict the future and to some extent influence the future by looking at, in this corporation, which businesses should we be in the future? Where should we be taking our money out of our existing businesses and investing it into our new businesses? Because it's the growth businesses that will generate our income in the future, not those businesses that are now established and potentially matured. There's a limit to the returns that you'll get with those. So it's a constant issue of strategy can help businesses to achieve a competitive advantage. Those strategies are likely to be different depending on the level of the business, corporation, network, or inverse, down to functional area like marketing or even product area. How could you develop your product strategy? So each of these different levels of strategy may well have and are likely to have a corresponding different competitive advantage. And that's very important because it means that in the situation in which customers have a choice, they can choose between your product or somebody else's. In the situation where the suppliers have a choice, they can supply to your business or they can supply to somebody else's business. in the situation where investors have a choice, they can invest in your business or businesses, your corporation, or they can invest in other corporations, and therefore your access to resources are going to be affected by the way that your business, your corporation, your product are perceived in the marketplace. That's really important. Okay, so we've already touched on this idea that competitive advantage then can actually have a number of different sources, but the key thing is a competitive advantage is that which is perceived effectively by the purchaser, the buyer, the stakeholder, and it's an advantage which is better than, it delivers something which is an advantage. So that was an intermission caused by the fact that I touched the wrong screen at the wrong time. So let's just keep going, and let's hope I can knit these two bits of film together. All right. So where does competitive advantage come from? Well, it can come from a number of different things, but typically competitive advantage can come from the actions of the company itself. In other words, by doing something differently, by innovating, by developing new products or new processes, what happens is the resultant value to the customer goes up, or alternatively, the value to the customer stays the same, but the cost of you doing it has gone down, and therefore, effectively, the net contribution is an increase. So that can normally happen because you're able to innovate and do things differently. You might focus on different marketplaces that might pay premium prices. You might decide to develop your product in some way, that's some form of incremental innovation. Or you may decide to have a range of different products which are all targeted at different market segments. And these are all important because in a particular segment, your competitive advantage may make a difference. In a different segment, the same competitive advantage may have no differential advantage. So that's the key thing. Are you better every time a customer, all those different types of customers, want to buy a product like yours? So there are a range of different things. So think about this, that 3C model we talked about last week, and the 3C model is the customer, the competitor, and the company itself. Each time you make some improvement, what's likely to happen is that improvement is going to be copied. Now, it's not going to be instantaneous. It never is instantaneous, in particular where the companies that you're competing with are large companies. So there's the issue of resistance, isn't there, and inertia, which means that companies that are large move slowly. So one of the advantages that you have is if you're quick-footed and nimble, you can make changes which, as a consequence of your competitors' slowness, can give you an advantage over a period of time. And if you continue to make those changes, so you're constantly delivering changes, what happens is your competitors are slowly but surely falling behind to the point at which they become so behind that they lose significant business, and you gain their business typically. So what can you do then to increase the chances that your competitors don't follow you quickly? But one of the things that often happens, and this might have been the case with Amazon, is you couldn't really work out if they were making any money. Everything they did seemed like a great idea, but every time they published their financial results, they were always making a loss. So it's a great way, isn't it, of giving the impression that you're a loss-making business that has just got a pie dream which will never be successful. So that's one way, and they call that identification. Your competitors cannot actually identify what is it that you're doing that might result in success, and therefore if it's not successful, maybe we shouldn't do it. The second thing is things like incentives. Why would you want to incentivize people to come into your business? What you want to do is disincentivize them. So actually the freemium model is giving away your product for nothing because no one can make any money that way. But if you happen to have the capital to keep that going for some time, you can dominate and control that marketplace. If you go in with the alternative model, which is a premium model, you skim those people that can pay large prices, for large profits, but you don't penetrate the marketplace, and therefore you're not able to control the marketplace. You're only able to control a small segment of it, and therefore, by using promotions and discounts, what can happen is you can make it actually unattractive for your competitors to follow you, even though in principle they could do. And the third thing you can do is you can make it very confusing. What exactly is it you're doing that the competitors can copy? And the more complicated you make your business in terms of its structure and the message it sends out, the products it has and the technology it's using, the more likely it is the competitors can't establish, but what's most critical? What's the one thing that we could do that would allow us to follow you? And that's an issue of diagnosis. And then the last part is that issue of resource acquisition. If you're an IT company, then the likelihood is you're going to need IT skilled, software engineers. But companies like Google and Microsoft, they essentially recruit all the best, which means that the best resources are in their companies. And that actually makes it very difficult to follow a company if you can't be just as good. So by reducing the resources available, and that can mean human resources, then companies can effectively gain a competitive advantage and keep that competitive advantage. All right. So I hope that's quite a nice summary for you of why competitive advantage is so critical. There are technically three main types of firm for whom competitive advantage has delivered outstanding and sustainable results. The first type is that type of firm that was able to deliver higher quality, more differentiated than anybody else. And that could be through resources, or it could be through engineering, or it could be through their reputation. And examples of that are people like maybe Rolls-Royce or BMW or Mercedes or Jaguar, companies that produce very high quality products for which they can target as an affluent marketplace, and everybody accepts that those are high quality products worth paying for. Then there's another type of company that specialises in making things very well in a very cost effective way. What they produce is a value for money product that actually does the job it should do, and actually it's very low price. In that situation, we find that those cost leadership is a sustainable model too, because effectively cost leadership generates income for the business without any particular cost for it. And therefore that gives resources to the company and enables them to take risks, amass capital, and to effectively buy market share. Okay, and then there's a third type of company, which is sometimes called focus or niche, where they segment the marketplace and choose a particular type of person. So people that buy dune buggies are people who particularly want to go out to the desert and to fool around, and they're prepared to pay a premium price, not high volume, but there's very few competition. There's very little competition. That means you can maintain your market share and you can sustain your advantage because you're not really competing with anybody else, right? So this issue of which strategy should I use, low cost, differentiation, or niche, is something that we're going to be looking at over the next few weeks, because companies evolve and companies change, and as they change, they may change the basis or the source of their competitive advantage. So I hope you like the new haircut, the new suit, the new environment. Still as noisy here, but I'm at work, so enjoy and see you soon.